Alrighties. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. I know folks have a lot of things going on, so I appreciate you taking the time and very much appreciate Tori joining us for this call. So she can talk a little bit about the work that she's doing and also her career journey and how she's graduated out of MENV and the sustainability in the outdoor industry specialization to where she is now. So Tori is currently the Western Slope Regional Partnership Coordinator with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, which is our state agency in Colorado. And in particular, she works with the Regional Partnership Initiative program, which is under CPW. Now, there's a number of you on the call who are both from MEV as well as our online ORE program. So obviously, slight differences in terms of the programs, one being online, one being on campus, but a lot of the content is somewhat similar. So hopefully, a lot of what Tori talks about as it relates to perhaps coursework that she took at MEV can also be relevant for the ORE folks too. But I'm going to hand it over to Tori and let you take it from here, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A as well for folks who've got any questions for Tori.
Great, thanks, Natalie. I'm just gonna share my screen with some slides I have prepared. Thank you for having me today. My topic in this career pathway series is from Capstone to a new career utilizing project opportunities to bolster your resume. And as Natalie mentioned, I know some of you are in MENV and some are in the ORE master's program or certificate program, but there definitely were varying projects and class courses that I took that helped me kind of bolster my resume. So hopefully wherever you are in the program, there'll be something that will be relevant. So just kind of a quick background on kind of my career path to date. So my undergraduate degree was a liberal arts degree. I kind of like gravitated towards communication and marketing internships. Also just did some kind of admin work in Audubon Center, was just kind of across the board interested in different things and trying things out. And my first career was actually in search engine optimization and digital marketing consulting. I was in Massachusetts for that, did that for a number of years. Based on some opportunities that I had there, I actually switched more into a project management role because that's kind of where my interest and skills aligned. And then kind of with COVID was really kind of thinking introspectively about what I was interested in. It kind of came back to the environment and sustainability and kind of really looked towards CU and the MENV program to kind of help with my career transition. And so, as Natalie mentioned, my new career is with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And I'll kind of go into that transition that I did through CU and kind of what I leveraged there. So just kind of looking at like the classes I took, one of the questions that was submitted was about kind of the classes I took. So being a sustainability in the outdoor industry student, I took all of the specialization requirements, and a lot of them really prepared me for the electives that I took that actually were kind of the project-based courses that really kind of like lit a fire for my interest in the field and kind of what I'm actually doing now. So I started MENV back in August of 2022, and I definitely had like a vague idea of what I was interested in, but I was really eager just to like absorb a lot of knowledge and experiences and hear about job opportunities and roles in the field. So my electives kind of did range from outdoor industry classes to like urban resilience classes and just kind of some general electives. And I'll talk about it later, but I did a lot of skills gap analyses work to kind of help me decide which classes I wanted to take for those electives. That way, I was kind of being kind of thoughtful with the classes I took and utilizing them to gain some of the skills that I was interested in. So I'll talk about one of the projects-based classes I took, which was actually Natalie's Building Community Capacity class. So in this class, I worked with the rural town of Hayden in Colorado to help improve their connectivity and accessibility by fostering business revitalization through the lens of outdoor recreation. And so part of that process was creating a comprehensive community action plan, which you can kind of see just our cover page there. from what our team created. And it really centered around outdoor recreation as well as Main Street development. And it also included a lot of stakeholder engagement, where we facilitated a 2-day in-person community workshop. And we're able to engage people through that means as well as an online survey. And this was kind of my real kind of first tangible taste of what a career in the outdoor recreation industry in this field could look like. And so, yeah, during my time at CU, this was one of the courses that I found really helpful, and formative for kind of that skill building, aspect of understanding what I was interested in, as well as being able to have those tangible skills leaving the program. Another big kind of project-based component was my capstone project. So I really specifically chose MENV because of the capstone component. I knew before I even started that when I was going into my career transition that I really wanted to gain those tangible skills, and be able to kind of bolster my resume, both with kind of the education and knowledge that the classes offer, but as well as kind of skills of being able to show that I've already kind of started in that work, and am able to do it. So I was put on a team of 4, and our project purpose was to conduct a program evaluation of the Regional Partnership Initiative in Colorado. And it was in partnership with CPW as well as the Outdoor Recreation Industry Office. And so it is a grant program, and we were interviewing stakeholders from across the state in kind of these colored regions, as well as some of the state and federal partners that help support the Regional Partnership Initiative to really understand what was working well, and what could be improved. And then as students kind of provide our recommendations for the overall program. And in this project, it was really stakeholder engagement heavy. We did about 40 interviews with different individuals from the state, federal level, as well as the 20 partnerships that make up the RPI. And this was something that I knew that I was really interested in from the building community capacity class. And so when I was kind of looking and assessing the capstone projects that were available for my year, this was something that really I gravitated towards because it was something I knew I was interested in and wanted to continue developing that skill. And I guess like one tip that I kind of learned from this process and want to pass along that like as you interview people either for a project or just have an informational interview with them, I found it really valuable. If it was, a great connection and something I was interested in to connect with them on LinkedIn afterwards. I'm sure people are already doing that, but just kind of a great resource as you're kind of entering this field. Then kind of just looking at other MENV opportunities. I really appreciated all the guest lectures that I had in my classes. There was a wealth of information on their careers as well as just kind of their industry insights. And yeah, as I said, if they, pique your interest and it resonates with you, definitely shoot them a personal message on LinkedIn. Sometimes it's also a great way to see the jobs that they post before they get circulated on some of the bigger job listings, or just kind of like, that contact and maybe be interested to work on their team. Another opportunity that I definitely really appreciated was access to different conferences. Definitely a way to network and learn. And also just, I met a bunch of ORE students through the process of going to different conferences throughout the year. And it's a great opportunity if you're able to attend any of them, either, here in Colorado or wherever you're based. And actually, a conference is how I got one of my internships. During my second semester of my first year, I went to a small business development conference, and I kind of put it on myself that I was going to make one meaningful connection and have kind of a meaningful conversation. So I, took it upon myself to pour through the speaker and panelist bios, and I found a panelist who owned their own branding agency for kind of outdoor lifestyle brands, and that really resonated with me at the time because of my background in a digital marketing agency. And so I approached her after her talk, and we kind of struck up a conversation, and it eventually did lead into an internship, after we kind of talked about what my skills were, and if she needed any help. So definitely a great opportunity to kind of have those conversations and make those connections. Another thing that was an incredible opportunity was just taking advantage of informational interviews. I definitely think it's possible to leverage your status as a student. I kept like a tracking document of, the people I was reaching out to and interested in talking to. And they're very likely to say yes to a 15-minute conversation. I think there's something about being a student who's eager to learn and learn from people in the industry. And so I definitely say, give it a chance. If you're interested in talking to someone and don't even have a connection with them, there is a chance that they're willing to talk to you. So I had some really great conversations with people throughout my years as a student, just kind of picking their brain and asking them a few pointed questions, and kind of learning more about the industry. And something I did use when I was mentioning the tracker, it was a career exploration organizer. And I know it is something that's circulated in MENV, and I believe it's probably also available to ORE students through the career department. But that was just a great way to just keep track of everything, from kind of brands or employers that you're interested in, job board ideas, kind of keeping track of who you're networking with, also just ideas on possible job titles to help down the line when you are searching for those jobs, as well as kind of actually keeping track of the applications that you're filling out. And it was something that I kind of kept open in the back of my computer pretty much all the time. And then, even when I was doing like in class and we were talking about a certain company, and them being a responsible business or something that piqued my interest, I'd kind of throw them on that list just so I would remember kind of, once I got closer to graduation, that was an organization I was interested in and kind of should look at when I got closer to actually applying for jobs. Um, and then kind of lastly, in terms of other opportunities, and things that I would recommend, was doing the skills gap analysis. That was another kind of template that was provided from the career department. And it's something I did at least once or twice throughout my years of just kind of looking at jobs that I was potentially interested in and seeing what the skills were either required or preferred. And then I color coded mine to kind of show like where I met the skills or maybe where it was I needed more experience in or maybe didn't have any experience in. And that exercise really helped me just kind of see maybe where some of my gaps were. And then I definitely took that into consideration when I was doing my course selection. So I'm sure that template too is something that's also available, or Natalie probably has access to as well. I didn't end up doing it on any jobs that I applied for, but it really helped kind of in the beginning when I was really kind of considering a few different paths, to kind of throw some of the jobs in that tracker or gap analysis document, and then just kind of analyze where I was at. And then kind of in terms of how I took all of the different experiences from my graduate program and kind of really helped use that to do my career transition. One of the things I spent a lot of time on, and I'm sure all of you have touched it in some sense of updating your resume. So I really liked the format where I had a personal statement, so I could kind of have my own individual mission statement. And then having a skill section. I was looking at it the other day and I highlighted four skills and I kind of put them there. And actually, three of them came from my previous career. And one of them was a new skill that I gained during graduate school. So I do believe, like, no matter what career industry you currently work in or maybe worked in before graduate school, there's definitely something that's transferable and can definitely be worked to your advantage when job searching. And then in terms of my course projects, whether that be a class or a capstone, I did kind of put that under my professional experience section. And, as I was kind of filling out my own, like LinkedIn, I definitely leveraged kind of my peers to see how they were kind of marketing themselves and talking about those experiences. And that's kind of where it made sense for me to put a lot of the details of the work that I had done over the 2 years of my program. And then one thing that I definitely did when I was filling out my application to CPW, there was a project deliverable that had been published publicly, and it was really relevant to the skills that they were asking for in the job. And so I actually did, after describing succinctly kind of my description of what the project was and how I contributed, I did include a link to it because I think it is, you know, um, important to be able to succinctly summarize what you're working on. But I think sometimes too, the quality of your work can speak from the deliverable. So if it is something, if you do have, projects that are published, I do think it's something that could be helpful in job applications. I do know some people commented on it during my interview, being able to kind of see not just from my words, but from the actual deliverables from the project, and be able to kind of share more information about myself through that. And then just kind of looking at my career after MENV, I was very fortunate that at the end of my capstone experience, our advisor at Colorado Parks and Wildlife was kind of launching two new positions on her team. And so I applied for the one that interests me and really did leverage my experience both through the capstone, but also through my class projects in that application and interview process. And what I do now is I support coalitions on the Western Slope. So from that map I showed earlier with all the different colored boxes and counties, I support all of them on the Western Slope and engaging them in regional planning for conservation, wildlife, and outdoor recreation. And I thought it would just be interesting to kind of highlight some of the responsibilities that I have now that really aligned with what I gained through my master's program. A big one of them being stakeholder and community engagement and being able to facilitate those conversations and events, as well as relationship building, kind of having that technical assistance with planning for natural resources and recreation, as well as project management. So those were kind of, the things that I had prepared. And I know I answered some of the questions that were submitted. I did kind of put a list here, but I will maybe defer to you, Natalie, on, questions from people on the call versus, yeah, some of these questions.
Yeah, thanks, Tori. I think given, all of you have showed up here, I'd love to give you all the first opportunity to ask any questions that you might have for Tori. And then after that, if, we get through all of those, we can hit some of these on the screen here. So if anyone has a question, put your hand up, because that way we can kind of go through, um, yeah, who wants to start?
Well, Tori, this is Pete. I don't have any questions for you, but I do want to say that was a great broad coverage of what it is people should be doing. It was good information. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand in the Zoom. Um, yeah, when you're maybe in an interview or talking to folks about these projects, what are some tips on keeping it succinct into like, obviously answering a question or maybe bringing up a project, but like I'll still um incorporating like all the scope and all the work and everything and the skills you learned with that project. Any tips on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm trying to remember interviews from almost a year ago, but yeah, definitely I think like maybe one or two sentences on kind of like the scope just so people have a little bit of that background, but definitely wanting to focus on how you contribute to the project and kind of your work there. Because I know sometimes when you're kind of living, breathing Capstone, you're really in the weeds, but wanting to remember and kind of pre-prepare your kind of elevator pitch or response there on kind of what the project was, and then kind of spend most of your time on the work you did and your contributions.
Thanks.
Doesn't look like anyone else here has a question. Um, So perhaps, Tori, we can go through some of these. Um, I think even starting from the first one, kind of builds off nicely from what Vinny just asked. But, during the hiring process for this particular job, was there a particular piece of work that was referenced a lot that you either referenced or, maybe the interviewers also referred to?
Yeah, there definitely were two projects, those being the building community capacity class, where kind of was that technical support for facilitation, and kind of working on a plan, for the town. That definitely came up a lot, as well as my capstone, since, my capstone did kind of roll into, my career. Definitely mentioned the capstone a lot, in my interview process, but also mentioned it in other jobs that I applied for and was interviewing for because it was just really relevant to the kind of area of the industry that I wanted to go in. And I would say, I guess, GIS definitely came up since I did take an intro course on that. And some of the positions had like very minimal GIS experience, sometimes listed in there. Maybe not required. Qualifications, but some of their like maybe preferred.
Awesome. And then were there any challenges that you faced in getting your current job?
Yeah, when I was reflecting on this question, I think the first thing that came to mind was just kind of getting maybe over my own imposter syndrome, because I was not currently a resident of the Western Slope at the time of applying, but during my capstone process, we did interview multiple coalitions on the Western Slope, and so as part of my preparation for the role and for even for the interviews, I kind of went back into the interviews we had conducted during grad school to really understand kind of the community concerns and needs and priorities. That way I could, advocate for them and kind of understand multiple communities without being a current resident of them. And I think another thing that I also kind of had to consider when accepting the role was just remaining flexible, because timing wise, they were definitely looking for an April start. And, with me being a full-time student and graduating mid-May, I had conversations with my boss, and we both were, flexible on kind of starting part-time a month and a half before my graduation. So that was something I did have to consider with everything going on with classes.
To throw something else in there, Tori, like you also had to consider moving, right? And I don't
Yes.
know if there were any sort of key things that you had to weigh up here because I think that's relevant to a lot of folks on this call or who will be watching this. Is either the desire to move somewhere, and get a job elsewhere, or if they, somewhat if their hand is forced, what are some of the key considerations that you thought about, when it came to accepting or not accepting this job?
Yeah. That is a really good question. Because yeah, as Natalie said, I was in person in Boulder, and then through this position, I knew I'd be staying in Colorado, but that the preference was and the requirement was that the person need to be located on the western slope. And so I did have kind of lengthy conversations with my now boss, of kind of what that entailed, because there was a lot of freedom within my particular role of where I could be located, just because we do have multiple offices across the whole state. So there was flexibility there, but it was something I had to consider, as I was applying, as well as kind of going through the interview process, and being offered it. And I'm kind of a nerd, so I made a spreadsheet of different places on the Western Slope and kind of took, different areas of my life and things that were important to me, and kind of my quality of life into consideration. And I think I knew going into grad school that I was willing to live anywhere in Colorado. And so that kind of helped with the overall decision of applying to this role, knowing that, I wanted to be in Colorado and I was flexible. But I know other people have other life considerations that maybe don't allow for that. But I did kind of have a spreadsheet, that helped me make kind of the final decision of where I'd be.
Awesome. Very cool. Um, this third question is an interesting one, but did you feel that certain jobs or maybe certain organizations or folks that you talked to during a hiring process valued um, your master's degree or experience in this particular field of study, or was it required? Was it not? Yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for some or maybe all of the roles that I looked into, I think they definitely valued a master's degree, that it wasn't always a requirement. But sometimes it says, master's preferred or something like that. And I did see that on applications. In terms of, I guess, my agency and in particular, when I was doing informational interviews before this was even posted, I was hearing that like a common career path to get into Colorado Parks and Wildlife was kind of through kind of seasonal work. And that wasn't something I obviously had since I was in grad school and wasn't working at one of the parks or, being a field tech or anything. But I did have actually informational interviews with other MENV students who at one point or another worked at CPW, and maybe didn't follow that path of having a seasonal job. And so I was kind of able to gauge if I would be a fit just based on kind of my career path and my skills and stuff, once I read the job description. And it was, maybe not based as much in kind of field work as some of the other jobs. Um, but yeah, I guess another answer to part of that question, kind of on the value of the master's degree, I think my position currently is in an interesting funding mechanism where I'm grant funded. So the graduate degree maybe didn't have as much bargaining power as I would have wanted, but definitely saw that like the state agency, valued it, and I know my capstone partner did. But yeah, without the master's degree, I definitely wouldn't have had a shot at the job, just because of the experience and skills that were needed.
Yeah, just building on that, I think a lot of folks, not everyone, I guess, is aware of state and federal agency jobs in particular, where they often have their own set of requirements that don't align very neatly with, bachelor's degree or master's degree that allows you to move from one tier to the next. And I know from memory, I remember us having discussions about that as to like what tier do you fall in? How much room is there to move to try and sort of finagle a better starting wage or a better starting title? And it can be tough with state and federal jobs because they have very strict, it's kind of like yes or no, you fit in this, and it's very black and white. Um, but yeah, I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add there.
Yeah, and I know like for CPW, I know there is kind of an emphasis on like the years of service to the state. And I know we kind of had talked about that um, when I was, discussing the offer and kind of negotiating there. And yeah, that was one of their criteria that they had and really took into account, making sure that they were paying employees kind of across the agency in a fair way. And I know the agency has come and is working on kind of looking at that in the future as well. But that is something, yeah, that I did have to factor in. And I do know the state kind of tier system is also very different from federal because
Mhm.
I have a lot of friends now in the federal side of things here in Grand Junction, and they're always throwing around different numbers, and it doesn't fully align with kind of how at least CPW categorizes positions. But yes, it is a whole kind of different ball of wax coming from kind of consulting and more of the corporate sector to then being in the government sector.
Yeah, and yeah, like you said, the federal, agencies do have their own rules and requirements. Those often do align. You definitely get to a certain level where at some point a master's degree is required, and it's pretty hard to go around that to move up. But Vinny, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking two-part question real quick. First, I just want to hear about your role now and kind of like what a day in the life looks like, maybe, if you could do that. And then pros and cons, you've kind of seen so far working at the state level.
Yeah, so kind of my day to day. So, of the 20 partnerships in the RPI, there are 13 of them on the Western slope. So most of them meet either kind of on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. So part of my week is attending either in person or virtual some of those coalition meetings that are happening across the state. That way I can, help provide support as well as kind of build those relationships on behalf of the state with those coalitions that are receiving funding through our grant program. I'm also kind of, checking in with other RPI staff in terms of our program, and we do have 2 rounds of grant applications every year. So I'm also helping just kind of support the overall process for those grants, as well as all the different levels of review that have to happen through our scoring committee for those grants. Um, checking in with my manager, as well as kind of working alongside regional CPW staff who either are, working within are part of the coalition or kind of need to be more in an advisory role and keeping them updated about what's going on in the coalition that's in their area. Um, because CPW is broken up into different regions and areas, and they don't always fully align with kind of like county boundaries. So making sure I'm keeping staff updated just with the coalition work that's going on in their area. So yeah, I think pretty typical with other jobs of, different hybrid meetings, and me having kind of flexibility to attend, when the weather's safe, some of them, and then others, are only virtual. So a good mix of, getting out there, and meeting people in person and building those relationships as well as going on different site visits. And also kind of supporting some of the statewide initiatives. There is a Colorado's outdoor strategy, which I didn't touch on, but it's being published in the spring of 2025. And there will kind of be a lot of resources and tools that the regional partnerships can use. And so also being kind of plugged into some of those statewide initiatives that then the different regions of Colorado will be able to leverage. So kind of keeping up to date on all of those and all of those happenings. And I think you said that your question was two-parter. So can you remind me what the second part
Oh
was?
yeah, just like some pros and cons of working at the state level you've seen so far.
Yeah, so coming from consulting, the government is, yeah, a very different sector, but I definitely think pros of it is just, really being able to collaborate with people from all across the state. That's kind of been really exciting for me. Being based in Grand Junction, but being able to work with colleagues all over the state, as well as in different state agencies. We do work closely with the Outdoor Rec Industry Office. So that's something that I really enjoy being able to kind of help with that work that we're both working in tandem on and having that collaboration. Um, and then I guess a con um, for work, I'm trying to think. Um, yeah, I mean, nothing's like immediately coming to mind, but I think just overall, like with my role being more people oriented than some of my previous roles, like that comes with its own challenges. Um, just from personalities and stuff like that. But I really wanted to get into like the relationship building and, community engagement. So that's kind of a consideration for that type of role. And was something that I was up for the challenge. But yeah, every day is a little different, which I do like. I think with my former career, it was really easy to get into like every week kind of feeling very similar and the same, just with like all check-in meetings and, it always kind of just being the same thing. But I definitely have that variety in government work that definitely keeps it interesting and, able to problem solve and meet new people and work with new people.
Thanks.
While we're still talking about the state level, I want to jump to that second to last question, Tori, about I'm not sure if you have insight on this, but for folks who are out of the state but are potentially looking to apply for a state position, it can be challenging. But whether you have any advice as to how to go about that based on conversations maybe that you've had with peers.
Yeah, I definitely remember coming across that when I was searching for jobs, specifically kind of within state government, that it either listed that you had to already be located in Colorado at the time of applying, or sometimes even it was the opposite of like this job is available to everyone except people in Colorado and a few other states that really have laws around kind of salary transparency. So there was kind of that in both directions that I was finding. I will say I don't have any like insider information on that process. I was lucky that I was already in Colorado when applying. But yeah, when I read this question the other day, I guess like my thought was, you know, if there are interests kind of broader than government jobs in this field, and like you have that flexibility of working maybe within another sector of the outdoor industry that would like allow you to come to Colorado and secure a job here and then be able to get access to kind of state government jobs. That was kind of my thought. But yeah, I wish I knew kind of why that was a requirement because I'm not entirely sure. And it hasn't kind of come up in conversations that I've had around hiring, but it is, yeah, a big barrier for, the employees that we have and talent from across the US.
A conversation that I've been having recently with a lot of students from both programs has been about, changing administration. Obviously, there's a lot of concerns about the incoming, well, not incoming, now administration, especially at the federal level, with jobs. What does that look like? Should I be applying to federal jobs or not? But, based on something you just said there, Tori, um, when there's challenges sometimes at the federal level, there also sometimes opens up opportunities within the nonprofit space too, to be doing some of this advocacy work, some of this conservation work, some of this outdoor recreation work too. Um, but I think also folks sometimes get concerned of, okay, are there going to be jobs under this administration without realizing that, some of these programs exist across different administrations. Some programs start under Republican administrations versus Democratic administrations. And, the good thing is there's a lot of momentum around the outdoor recreation space. But I think, going to that last question there about the Explore Act, there's a lot of excitement about the fact that this did pass because it was very close in terms of getting it over the finish line. But the question then is sort of, do you have any sense? Have there been any conversations as to what this might mean at the federal or state level, in terms of what could potentially trickle down from what has been approved in a number of those bills?
Yeah, yeah, and this was a great question, and I think it definitely remains to be seen kind of with the implementation of the legislation. But as I was kind of reviewing some of the language in there around supporting agencies that are managing recreation and kind of modernizing some of the infrastructure, I think it does give me hope of maybe some increased implementation funding. And I would hope definitely with that, that would mean more state and federal jobs are created to really help with those implementation projects. I haven't heard anything like directly for Colorado and what that would mean, but it definitely is, good news for the industry, and would hope that would definitely trickle down for jobs as well. And I definitely think, the outdoor recreation industry office will be intimately involved in that for Colorado, and we do partner with them closely on some of our projects. So I definitely now want to bring that question to them too to see if they have any insights on how that's going to look over the next few years or even months.
Yeah, it was actually funny. I was just on a call earlier today with someone who was pretty intimately involved in drafting together at least two of the bills that form the Explore Act. And I think one of the challenges they mentioned was there are some implementation measures, built in, but on a whole, there isn't a funding source, right, for a lot of what has been outlined. And this isn't uncommon, but that's kind of the next step, I think, for a lot of folks is, okay, now we have the Explore Act in place. Now let's see what kind of funding we can appropriate and assign to some of the different aspects, which will then hopefully trickle down, whether it's in grants, whether it's in jobs. But the momentum is there and the interest is there. So fingers crossed it comes into something. But going back to one of the questions that I missed, but I think it's a good one to potentially end on, or at least sort of kick this ending conversation, is about, if you're new to the program, whether it's new to MENV or new to ORE, what are some of the things that you did and that you also recommend, or maybe what are some of the things that you didn't do that you wish you had gotten started on earlier so that you're really utilizing the time that you have in graduate school to the best of your ability?
Yeah, definitely like kind of the first thing that came to mind was the skills gap analysis matrix template from career services of, when I was interested in a couple different paths, kind of plugging those jobs in and then seeing kind of where I already had skills and then what skills I needed, and then being able to help me select my classes or even like my internships based off of that. So that way I could kind of make progress towards my own goals of what I wanted to do with my career pivot. And not to put more work on you, Natalie, but I think definitely talking to my advisor, Natalie, for guidance was really helpful. I think we met at least, once every semester. And I would, come in and even be like, I'm between these two classes and this is the skill I want to get. Like, what do you think would be most beneficial? And so I think starting that early is definitely good as you're selecting electives. And then I think with the Career Explorer organization sheet as well, that was really helpful for me to visually see kind of different organizations or employers that I was interested in. I definitely will say maybe I wish I had started informational interviews earlier. I think I definitely got in my head a little bit about it. And then once I was more serious about it in my second year, was, yeah, really pleasantly surprised with how many people were like, yes, I'm definitely willing to like, have a 15-minute phone call and talk to me about kind of my interests and the questions I had about their role or their industry. So. I will say it's also never too late to start doing that. I know we talked in our kind of Capstone 3 class a lot about that. And that was our, I guess, first semester of our second year. And, was able to prioritize trying to have like one informational interview a week for that semester and then bleeding into my final semester. And so, yeah. It's never too late. So even if you are in your final semester, you still can have some really beneficial conversations while you're still kind of maybe figuring things out or kind of weighing a couple of different options.
Yeah, I like that. And I think one of the things that I often tell students is, especially for those where you're maybe prone to procrastinating on the networking front because it is a bit uncomfortable, setting yourself that goal. It's almost like an assignment. Like every week, I have to have reached out to at least two or three people to set up an informational interview, right? And just so that every week you're constantly forcing yourself to do that because before you know it, cold emailing doesn't seem as painful as maybe it originally did. And then same thing, like the more informational interviews you do, the first however many are going to be extremely awkward and clunky, but the more you do, the easier it becomes. And so by the time you step into an interview, talking to people you don't know, um, explaining yourself and who you're about and what you're passionate about comes a lot more naturally. And for some of those things, especially for those who are a bit more introverted, the only way to do it is to practice, really, right? And so I think the informational interview piece is key, especially while you're in grad school, because like Tori said, I think you often forget what's in it for the person you're reaching out to. Like a lot of them love to talk to grad students because you're passionate about what it is you're doing. You're really interested in learning, how someone got there, and people love to share that story, right? Especially if they love the work that they do. And a lot of people want to pass it on. And, 15 minutes, 30 minutes of their day isn't a big ask, but they feel really good after it, right? I think I often talk to a lot of industry professionals who either, come in for a Zoom guest lecture or come in for an in-person event. And they're always like, thank you. Like, this has energized me for at least the next month, right? Because I was getting really bogged down in some of the work that I was doing. And coming and talking to your students is a great way for me to step back and be like, wow, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing because it's actually making a difference. And your students reminded me of that. And so don't feel like you're always burdening someone. Like there is something in it for them too. And if they didn't feel like there was, they'd also just say no. So um, it is easy to get in your own head about it for sure.
Yeah, and I will say, like, if there is if anyone has hesitancy around it, I definitely kind of started maybe with like some of the more easy or like lower hanging fruit of like either, lecturers, or guest speakers that I thought were really interesting. So I did have kind of that warm connection with them. And or, even my capstone advisor, I had like individual kind of informational interviews with both of my capstone advisors or partners, I should say, outside of just our kind of team meetings. And they already kind of know you and kind of know what you're working on. And so it was an easier way to kind of branch into that informational interview style of being able to talk about what I'm passionate about, what my interests are, and pick their brains as well. So that's always an option too.
And this is where your instructors come in handy too, right? So like having a meeting with any of your instructors, whether it's online or on campus, and then sharing with them what your interests are, because then they can tap their network as well and be like, okay, based on what you said, like I think you should really talk to this person I know. And then again, by us being able to make that warm connection for you, you kind of know you're talking at least to a friendly and receptive person, right? Because otherwise we wouldn't have put you in touch with them. So that and alumni. I think people often forget about alumni and peers within the program. Um, and again, we can help connect on those fronts, but that's probably the friendliest and the easiest and the lowest hanging fruit, right? Um, but learning about their experience, learning about what they've done, who they've talked to, and also just now in their roles, I think that's a good place to start. Cool. Do we have any more questions before we sign off for the night?
I'll just switch it, yeah, to my contact information as well if anyone wants to connect or talk more. I have my email there as well as my LinkedIn page. So
Then Angie, go for it.
Real quickly, Tori, could you toggle back to the electives that you highlighted at the beginning? I was curious about that. I admit I asked, I was wondering which classes. Um, yeah, the bottom couple. Very
yeah.
cool.
So yeah, just to run through those. The building community capacity was a SOI elective, as well as the policy, philanthropy, and global impact class. And then GIS was a general elective, and it was kind of geared towards sustainability professionals. So there were instances where I talked about some of those mapping projects, either in an interview or even just when we had a guest lecture in another class, and I maybe did a project that related to that. It was just, something that I was excited about and could share with them and make those connections. And then I took a couple of urban resilience classes, which were the sustainability and resilience in practice and the resilient futures, which is like a planning class. And then did a facilitation class and a justice class, which were also both just general electives.
Very cool. Thank you.
I'd say, Angie,
The
some of
only,
those don't exist anymore.
I know, as I was saying it, I was like, I have a feeling this one doesn't exist, but
So the policy one doesn't exist anymore, the policy, philanthropy, and global impact. Um, and climate and energy justice does, but we're moving it to the fall. So it was meant to be the spring, but we moved it.
okay. The one lingering thought I had is I'm a first year just for context, and in Capstone we have made like Wix personal portfolio websites, and I was curious, have any employers or interviews, have you shared that as a recap, or has that been like an important supplemental piece of like presenting yourself to people?
yeah, I know. When I was kind of in my final semester, that was an option for us to be able to create one of those Wix websites. I will say I didn't get around to doing it when I was kind of updating my resume. I kind of really leaned on my LinkedIn to maybe have like links to some of those projects, but I definitely know friends and stuff who have those, and it is a really impressive way to like highlight all of their accomplishments as well as their projects and be able to present it in a very, palatable and easy to digest way. So yeah, I didn't kind of have like use that as one of my kind of tools in the toolkit, but I definitely see the value in it. Um, so yeah.
Thanks.
Just because you mentioned Tori LinkedIn, one thing I do want to highlight to folks is I do recommend you spend some time. Like if it's a toss-up, Angie, between a Wix page and your LinkedIn, like I would make sure your LinkedIn is up to scratch first, because I definitely know lots of folks are using it from a hiring perspective. Um, because I get folks who reach out to me and say, "Hey, I see you're connected to this person. What can you tell me about them?" Right? They're interested in a position with us. Or I've done that as well with other folks who are interested in maybe doing a guest lecture. I'm like, "Oh, I don't really know who you are." I'll reach out to someone I see as a mutual contact and be like, "Hey, do you actually know this person? And if so, can you give me, some thoughts? This is what I'm considering them for." And so it really is an area where a lot of folks are looking and paying attention. So doing what Tori mentioned, where you're really thoughtfully outlining projects without, instead of just saying, "Oh, I'm consulting on this or helping with this," but actually giving some meaningful information and any links, um, that's probably where it's going to get looked at um, by potential employers. So
Yeah, and there is, I think, too, with LinkedIn, that social aspect of like being able to have a post around a deliverable you created, or if a project comes to the close, be able to kind of reflect on the experience and like kind of share your accomplishments. And again, sometimes I would get nerdy in that and kind of put even some of like the numbers and stats that I had with it of like, oh, this is how many interviews we conducted, and the skills that I gained from that experience. And then I definitely felt like when I was highlighting that skill either on my resume or on my LinkedIn page, that I really kind of had the information to back it up of like, I was interested in it even from, my first semester of grad school, and like this is how I've been progressing with that skill or experience.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank everyone for the time that you've given tonight. Appreciate, obviously, Tori, you sharing your experience, but also appreciate the great questions too that have come forth. But we will, we've recorded this obviously, and I know Pilar will share this on the ORE side, and I'll share it on the soy side as well. So it's, there for you to reference in case there's something that was discussed that maybe you've missed. But otherwise, it was great to see you all, and have a good evening.
Thank you for having me, and best of luck on all of your journeys ahead.
Thanks again, Tori.
Thanks, Tori.
Thanks.
Bye, folks.